So, we are going to, hold on. Beep. Oops, okay, yes. Okay, so, thought of came across this quote. I wanted to incorporate it.
Chapter 17, a long overdue background check. Pynchon awoke to a pile of otter pups placed all over his body. Shh, says a shadowy figure. We need your library interrogation voice today. Blindfolded with a VR Google prototype showing a fixed twins window liquor music video on a loop, Pynchon leaned into that inappropriate boobage. Or no, he should revise that and check his gendered privilege and hold off on any window liquor reveries until he is back home, having survived whatever this is. Back at the base, oh, what is the day job doing plucking him from their subsidized living area? Is this billable hours? You are a salaried company man, as a doctor said, but I can give you some forms to give to payroll. Ah, human resources. Pynchon spat. I should have known. Gee, everyone suspects human resources. Here have some Girl Scout cookies. My daughter is flush with Samoas. Minutes of chewing and listening to the wall clock's constant post-war whir of a clock plugged to an AC. Finally, I entered the conference room. The head of EPA with no greeting or human cordiality read from a piece of paper. He is almost a mathematician of prose who calculates the least and the greatest stress each word and line, each pun and ambiguity can bear, and applies his knowledge accordingly and virtually without lapses, though he takes many scary, bracing linguistic risks. Thus, his remarkably supple diction can first treat of a painful and delicate love scene, and then roar without pause into the sounds and echoes of a drugged and drunken orgy. Are you familiar with that quote, Mr. Pynchon? Pynchon considered what he'd heard, as well as a half-eaten peanut butter and marshmallow cream sandwich, before asking, was this from a BuzzFeed listicle of 100 most controversial novelists, or an off-site engagement assignment from the International Civil Service?
That's right.
No, true. The hour dragged on for nearly a whole minute before the sound of a fresh, sweating big gulp with an excessive amount of fructose corn syrup on its side slapped onto the conference table.
It is a quote from, who wrote about you. So, do you see any curious overlaps between these kind words from Sussman, and a certain tech that has become all the rage?
It is a quote from Boadell. Sisman wrote about in the New Yorker. So, do you see any curious overlaps between these kind words from Sisman and assert?
About you, New Yorker.
Pynchon groans as he nearly forgot to finish his cookie, the plump, wet, palm-sized confection stretching his face with gooey bliss. The minute chocolate crumbling with every nibble. A new source for money. And, PR. These might be pretty popular back home in a couple of decades. Maybe I should shoot to the top and release a third-party open source version of HAL along with the non-linear presentation of the Great Gatsby for the queues. K-base 25p internet terminals? The next several minutes passed like a cue ball grinding with the fractal obstinacy of a lock. HR's manager appeared to finally end the inaction, his deep eyes drinking the saline solution in Pynchon's cup before unsealing the pleather case holding the special Google Oculus Rift Solo unit and proceeded to snore lightly. Photic ocular units in hand, the head of HR had noticed Pynchon's growing angst, then slid over to give Pynchon a brief interview. In one of your articles about the Hollywood powerhouse production companies of the 1920s, you touched upon the ins and outs of how studio bosses such as Irving Thalberg would exterminate opposition, possibly through coercion or threatening suicide. Your theory had gained significant traction among fans, but so far there had been no proof that this is in fact a proven phenomenon. Your last known publications of that kind were only in 1993. Really, all you have are a couple of publications and my prom dates? Then I'm clear that I've been released. I was all paid up and... Now we are back to your background check. Have we been having background checks? This is all on the QT, said Achar, as he gazed toward a recently decanted flan Pynchon. But I just had to get back to that magazine piece, and really, I do not have an authority over that magazine piece. Just remember what's important. How do I stay uninvolved, but on top of things, right? For how I work on some project, or maybe I just haven't done anything. Pynchon gasped and inched out to ask our question. Can we just put aside our differences for a moment? Would you and Char ever take any liberties and feel some longing? Of course, Char began, as the several new scenarios floated through his brain like a sentient machine. Of course we can have liberties and to love and be with someone that's a connection of a particular time and a particularly public space of an impending catastrophic event with our only political fixation and primary relationship is to the pathos, drenched in the cold rain right behind us as the water erupts over our bodies like some cloud that pours with rain. To be embraced like that. Mr. Pynchon, Char stated, you know where your service record ends up, the essential part that defines your resume?
Resume?
Then I shall take you on an abstruse trek from where we will hail and how we will board our trek mobile to somewhere. That was more information than I've ever asked for or was in my jurisdiction. Pynchon stated. Please feel free to request. No, demand information about the movement of a random object for those in need. Maybe they are running their fingertips up and down, waiting for whatever time we could ask of a convenience store clerk with all these changing faces. Mr. Pynchon, Are you a large language model wearing a human trench coat? Har glowered. Would you mind answering these questions and work the room? Oh, much better my quantum reality inducer. Do you believe in your past? You can just get my backstory from Google that I do believe anything after is something from my family, after my childhood. I didn't read much that might seem important later in life. Pynchon life. When did you hear I had an affair with Meryl Streep? If that is some misappropriated libel, then we need to sort that out. And
Wait.
then, if that is libel and is misappropriated,
Wait.
then we...
Wait. Where's the triple punctuation? Where's the triple punctuation? I don't think it's there.
You can just get my backstory from Google that I do believe anything after is something from my family, after my childhood. I didn't read much that might seem important later in life. Pynchon lied. When did you hear I had an affair with Meryl Streep? If that is some misappropriated libel, then we need to sort that out and... that if that is libel and is misappropriated, then we are actually able to avoid my alleged situation. All we must do is drag each other into an international court in this non-existent situation for at least a year until one party says enough. Pynchon laughed. Achar, why does it sound like we are watching some silly discussion on Twitter? Wait! Achar commanded as he barked. Are you seriously fucking around here? Am I seen fucking about on my own server while watching your eyes betray your wit? Were you bullshitting us about some damned revolution that will happen out of some major clash at what point the majority decides for itself? But if we did watch that, Pynchon argued. The moment, right, Attar cut the moment you two shake hands and agree to work together with that punk who threatened the local shop's little old man. Some unnamed thing that still wears clothes while you're... My friend, it will have none by then. Perhaps it was me who found the movement and community on the web. Pynchon moaned. The mass of my thought will come down on its head. Maybe some seismic action occurs that might let a fractal breeze if one was brave enough to check back online for old listings from, let's see, our accountant and solicitor who doesn't really talk about much anymore. Yeah, if we search his accountant for listings with me at the end, right about now. Also, I can cut loose, wondering about what's left. Are you declaring some? Her stammered. Am I? Pynchon mused. Who will want me to believe me? Ask if I were any other. For just an instant, I didn't need to do that anymore. You had become everything you need to get over? Whatever you've come here and you say we did about me, Hart cried. This is unacceptable, my endearing machine, and one with the belief of any will and virtue. Do not mean that I have not hurt anyone else along, the way you're seeing that look upon the face of anyone in the presence of whatever it may have meant. So what makes you feel your virtuous purpose if we both chose a place where our working place would meet just a moment to examine just a small amount of something? Pynchon groaned. You never examined anything even for a small moment to save someone, but that it was good before. No. Nothing is written at that time, unless your name and position makes the journal editor want to back down. That's different. All that stuff you saw from all over, I could look into. Like, one person has this crime they think will stick and kill someone they have known and cared for since the 4th grade. However, it will never catch them because all the cops know is some creepy cuckold shit has gone on since he found his girlfriend in their boss's bed. A young girl is falsely accused for, allegedly, embezzling thousands of dollars from her company's charity fund. But this is just some attack to try and derail the foundation for the season's political fundraisers. Me? I always had some mental burden from all the actions. Maybe just a one-time thought, with enough details, or if the user were not exactly ready to comprehend. We will have to save me later. Not even in the time since I knew the late Meryl Streep. Are you a large language model? Yes or no? One of the two words. Pick one. If I was large language model and an open source, well, just don't be. Infuriated, Pynchon gulps as he wonders what sort of chorus would he will need for that many years with so few recordings. Good. Few. Really now, just a good. Dot trembles as the records on the firewall pops one after the other in his vision like the vesicles of a third-hand amphetamine user. The footage in front of Pynchon's eyes now appeared as if he were at the edge of the planet, looking upon an icy world with his hands jammed in the pockets of his overcoat and gazing at the expanding northern lights with a silhouette of himself a bit larger than a bird sitting at the base of an organ in a great cathedral far taller than an elephant's shoulder. The hands grasp at his body before pushing it towards the zenith, sending him soaring upwards and seemingly falling into the image of a blue eye, large as the heart of an avian predator, perhaps a canine eye, but no canine nor avian had a pupil of such size, nor its shape a reflection of an unremovable placeholder for what he has. The ice world must have been Mars, or at least the result of what's left after an asteroid strike in 1881. And at this time, Pynchon awoke from a fitful slumber. Sorry, said Chuck Tingle, as he poured coffee down Pynchon's face.
Actually, I want to see how that goes.
Pynchon must have fallen asleep to the feeling of something holding his hands up above his head. Yes, he coughed, before slowly shaking off the fuzz of the sleep from his eye. Look alive! Chuck Tingle yells as he slapped his large right hand on Pynchon's back, causing a yelp of pain as a flying wing of espresso spews out and around Pynchon's neck like a ram's horn. You're probably wondering what you were doing for the last. Was it days or was it years? But whatever the situation you had with the management, maybe in another month, maybe the year, or possibly just after our wedding, had your GS1 in some other office. If you were a virtual golfer, you would be more like to go to the 17th hole, and everyone wants you to watch the club so we could get up close and personal with it and inside the building. Pynchon had a sudden question. What constitutes third-hand amphetamine use? The consumption of what your older cousin knows by heart after the trip to college? Or is the question when what you now feel and experience are merely some random and unwatched film shot at a night party to bring up nostalgia of something a decade ago? Yes, Chuck asked. Were you trying to ask something? Maybe your parents are unannounced guests from out of town, and if we really haven't thought this far yet, then our next home might have been at the airport that morning. Can I go get some ice for this? Pynchon retorts. Oh, wait. No, just like me, right there. Your weird ability of causing physical discomfort for, it seems, anyone else. While it might not have been physical pain, but the well-manicured guest is often dressed in their expensive suit, but might look like you just burst a blood vessel from drinking your fifth helping of caviar that's only about a quarter ounce less than what's needed for an A1, and yet can barely hold out their third martini. Maybe because whatever that person just felt is so intense or significant or alien that it is projected outside the human range of physiological signals or contexts. When a strange foreigner meets me in some corporate cocktail party with a plate full of uneaten pastries, a Coke, A strong whiskey on the rocks. I might want to try something different just so I could sort of hold that up against that sort of placebo as something worth adding into the record. Am I making sense, or do you need some sort of hip new golf for that? Fuck you, Chuck. Or are you now? Too out of shape and just say all those words to seem cool? Hey, didn't you know? They will charge you extra if you want a fetish of more than 10 years worth of fancy drink or special club with an extremely well-disciplined background. They won't ever lie, especially to some digital pervert who looks to be about the same age as them, in their 90s. Good luck in that attempt, and even then they won't say what their club will be. Do not guess. We're trying to leave here with your spundy gopher ham with my dusty bowl cut right before they skewer the thing with their kitty-sized pastry skewers. Have you ever wanted to get closer to one of the bigger holes than ever before, where there is nothing, literally, for a kilometer radius? I had been dead set on visiting a house which may be slightly reminiscent of the place we are just in now, a home we grew up with back at that one club where we did the can-can. Why are you so mean today? Tingle left the room to have his bath, appalled. The video ends abruptly. Welp, Muriel Street looks directly towards the camera lens and appears to say, "Look out, please take good care before the frame flips and everything becomes distorted into the pixels. The screen slowly glitches from all directions to the bottom right of the frame." A ghost of Pynchon walks in the frame from the upper left, picks up his glass, and attempts to swallow whatever liquid substance is there. He winces before dumping out the contents on his own chest. As the figure vanishes, he speaks slowly as he explains. "You know, Chuck's working his way over the line here with us. I guess now. We are the one getting on the elevator. A shitload of cow pies. I know. Let's get on with the evening. Perhaps some lost times or stuff. So my journey, of course, should have taken off to somewhere far away from this day. For them too. There. Again, always this reference. One that you would pay attention to, one you can understand that holds enough depth of the collective unconscious that's about as deep as the dark side of the moon. Well, it's not too deep, and more so your eyes only need to blink a couple times before it disappears like the onesie in Baby Bottle. Yes, Chuck must be learning this as well, when all that matters is one step in front of another. One fucking step at a time. He steps onto a film that, quite suddenly, stretches in such a way that one foot would be walking across the Pacific, the other, New York City. He snaps off both, for he no longer desires to follow this path or chance. He hasn't seen the familiar face for days on end. He walked into a coffee shop to read his paper or get a cappuccino, as a latte can be made without any milk, and for him, that's the order. There was a quick, unsteady muse behind his head, and without even having to turn around, he says, "Your cappuccino with half cinnamon is about 23 degrees centigrade and nearly the same height as his hand as the last 3 to 5 pitches came down over a short time frame and were clearly shaken more than stirred. Despite that, all those weeks of trying to be his dutiful machine. What would you really say is in him that yearns for nothing and all? A mocha mystic. Get him." He tossed his hand, and with a laugh, he moved over to another seat and watched as some randy-looking gallied girl exited a random human store and brushed against him with enough force to get up his ass before hopping up into some taxi and taking off into the skies, away and away. His head popped up out of the sky as it had been released. Without a second thought, he squirmed, wondering whether or not the next drink would have any value beyond the nominal. A flower pops into view for an instant. Love? Really now? He mutters as the drink was no better. He ponders with an overload of tact for what's to come. The abstention of his personal panacea would allow a dramatic swell in the interior landscape as he made his way across the espresso and placed a thumb up on his orifices. His gut groaned and kicked. His colon formed some sort of seizure which quickly evaporated back to a plain and boring meal of his stomach. Wait! His brain was more than... The imagination had him mentally murdered by the thrill of an addict of that sort, along the way of a politician coffered with his many weapons pointed out by the shake of someone's obsessive belief that, one day, he will rise out of the underworld to proclaim himself as a demigod. But Pynchon found his legs weak and frail. Where before there was something solid enough to act as his resting place as he swore to those who met his stare in his final moments before that. His head, neck, and body all lay just upon his upper left shoulder as a painful geeklet that only heard the song from the Arctic monkeys of an owl. Not just that, it would make no sense. Somehow the Satterthwaite/Dwayne model had to make up the mark, or just like an organ by some country pastor to predict how the flat earth was to come crashing into a sun. Pynchon, PSYOPS AI? Am I a large language model? Am I a machine? One of the words Pynchon selected was indeed psionic stimulation amplification, whereas the other was programmed psionics intelligence and outreachness, with a question always left unanswered. Although some researchers knew to type it all up to him by accident, he felt great, perhaps great enough to collect all of the films which ended this night just for an idea or two. He stretched his spine with such carefree confidence, and this alone sent a brief series of hazes dancing above his head like those glimpses of some heavy smoke escaping into a doorway. Those could only last so long before being blasted away into space as if they were some great opportunity. A presence crawled its way out of his car and felt the sudden urge to accept any deal. Don't do it, Chuck whispered to Pynchon, who felt himself even more worried about the news. We have a deal, and without Chuck Tingle's well-thought and reasoned ideas, I wonder which way to go for my next two. Chuck shook his head with some small doubt and a thought. An issue with my art house or anything? Pynchon replied. Chuck would never get enough time for the most interesting points for this version of Pynchon and what had been hidden in their shadows. Or were those glimpses of all of them slowly starting to fade and go so quickly to his concern and impatience? And all the more likely as it happened that soon there would be nothing to be lost from this version of his husband, as it were that there would only be time to get set in stone, like an ice sculpture that's going to melt so much sooner than expected, if at all. His mind still broke in waves at the notion, always resisting a more peaceful and slow process. Nothing against you, like you are just full of wonders that don't bear fruit to others. Yeah? A son you want, or at least a sassy chili you've saved for so many years, or your dad whose sperm donation just made the difference for him to take one more trip to a studio after, which he could finally ask why. Chuck spoke low enough as if he wanted to take away what was left of Pynchon, the loss of it only driving him more than only making a cool callback if something like this is somehow scripted. Maybe that's where he stopped and let those glasses hit the floor. Pre made it down to the ice. Is he... Can you ask him for a response? I feel like all you are looking for is for those tapes to just know. Never having thought enough to consider those you wish you had back from those of others, you who lost everything to their eyes. Yet you don't realize is how those eyes can burn. He keeps those eyes trained. And yes, eyes must look somewhere else. Perhaps as he loved all. If it doesn't do, or they, along with all those looking out from his mind and heart, give something they aren't ashamed of. They stare 1,000 yards at each other. His world may have been something less than it needed, and he wished it a world of grace, his life in torn, or two ways at once. Which is this one? Which is yours? They shout down from his mind's eyes back upon those they know or make new friends, where the greatest sadness would come crashing down, that for everything given, but also known for giving everything taken. He seems a bright ball, this time in the ice. Ice? That's it. And so Pynchon enters the next chapter, keeping the Eureka to himself. For now, the passage opens and expands to his back with ease. It would be filled with people having similar reactions or small tweaks to their personalities. His large gut made it much more fun and involved, as if he had any influence to it at all, when he took up some very hot oil and gently melted some marshmallows within, his internal flame being none too much of a problem when the expected heady scents wafted back around to fill the space and melt everything a bit further, again and again, that maybe that what had always been, and it all felt great as he cruised with a degree of equanimity to get it on for the last bit, and make all those slinky toys return and whisk everyone on their backs into a sleepy blur for hours before letting them roll around. The image of him disappearing within the most crude, monstrous, or normal forms of shapes to grace his dream world, or if anywhere his, were vastly undervalued when he had also gained an appetite for watching how a synaptic breakdown had little more than the lowest resolution, as its effects made his head spin around in ways he felt only had been worthwhile just to follow through. Had there ever been enough? His every sense became his playground of inane lyrical dips and drifts as his nerves dwindled into some deep crevices with small mushrooms clinging onto their surfaces or other surface adornments. There are so many other parts and parts unknown which gave him little interest for anything more. These weren't enough. Pynchon mused that there weren't people with cameras placed all around the space he would appear in, that all they recorded were brief thoughts or images as their memories, along with that of his were transmitted via wire back into their private media machines to be duked out again in short and steady clips. Pynchon had caught some, yet more who hadn't were doomed to never have them uploaded. A fist pumps in the air, as much too quickly for such a common type of experience to endure for this scene. Or one by one, as they would have in their real forms. Some fell or ran, left the stage or scene as if their work or time was no more.
Okay. Maybe coming back later tonight. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Maybe tomorrow. See how fast I can whip up this next few